At 2:30 in the morning on February 14th, 2000, 9-year-old Asha Degree was seen asleep in her bed. By 4 a.m., drivers on Highway 18 reported a small child walking alone through darkness and rain. One motorist turned around. The child left the roadside and vanished. More than a year later, Asha's book bag was found buried 30 miles away, wrapped in sealed black plastic, with objects inside that never belonged to her. Decades of investigation, forensic testing, new searches, and serious allegations have followed, but no conviction. Why did Asha leave home? And who saw her after she disappeared from Highway 18? To understand what was lost that night, you first have to understand who Asha was. Before her name became synonymous with one of the Southeast's most baffling mysteries, Asha Degree was a bright, energetic 9-year-old girl living a structured life in Shelby, North Carolina. She shared a bedroom and an exceptionally close bond with her 10-year-old brother, O'Brien. Their parents, Harold and Akila, worked diligent shifts to provide a secure, nurturing environment, establishing daily routines centered around school, family, and faith. The family home on Oakcrest Drive was a place of stability. To those who knew her best, Asha was a lively, warm presence in her family, fully supported by parents who monitored her activities and guarded her safety with care. In the classrooms of Falston Elementary School, where she was a 4th grader, teachers and classmates knew her as a dedicated student. She possessed a quiet maturity, often described as an old soul because of her responsible and kind nature. Beyond her academic efforts, her life was anchored by her community. The Degree family was active in their local church. Asha attended Sunday school and participated in church functions regularly, growing up in a space where neighbors looked out for one another and families shared long-standing ties. This communal foundation provided a safe, predictable rhythm to her upbringing. That structured world also featured a spirited, competitive side. Asha loved sports, particularly youth basketball. She played on a local team, bringing a determined energy to the court. While she was typically quiet and reserved around adults, the basketball court revealed a passionate competitor who cared about her team's performance. It was a healthy, positive outlet for a child described by friends as cheerful and quick to smile. In photographs from this period, she stands with styled hair bows and a warm, steady gaze, representing a childhood untouched by conflict. Understanding this normal, protected daily life is essential, as she was not a child known for running away or defying her parents. Asha was a young girl firmly rooted in her family, her school, and her faith. On Saturday, February 12th, 2000, 2 days before she vanished, Asha played in a local youth basketball game. It was a major match for her undefeated team. During the play, Asha fouled out, and her team lost by a single point. Immediately after the final buzzer, she was visibly devastated, crying with her teammates on the court. Some observers later speculated whether this emotional setback triggered her decision to leave her home. However, the family's recollections paint a different picture. Her parents and brother noted that her disappointment dissipated quickly. By Saturday afternoon, she was cheering at her brother's game. By Sunday morning, February 13th, she had fully recovered her usual cheerful demeanor. That Sunday, the family followed their established routine. They attended Sunday school and church services together. Asha laughed, interacted normally, and showed no signs of lingering distress. Investigators have explicitly avoided attributing her departure to the basketball game, viewing it as normal childhood context rather than a motive. To those who knew her, Sunday was a completely ordinary day, marked by the predictable, safe patterns of family life. As evening approached, the children prepared for school the next day, and the household settled into its quiet nighttime routine. There was no indication of anxiety, no conflict, and no sign that the quiet rhythm of their lives was about to be shattered. The night of February 13th, 2000, began with a disruption. A car crash near the Degree home on Oakcrest Drive struck a power pole, plunging the neighborhood into darkness. This utility outage postponed the family's typical evening routine, forcing them to delay the children's baths and settle into bed earlier than usual, using candles for light. By 12:30 a.m., the electricity was restored. Harold Degree, who worked a late shift, returned home shortly after the power came back on. He walked through the quiet house, checked on 9-year-old Asha and her 10-year-old brother O'Brien in their shared bedroom, and then sat down in the living room to watch television. At 2:30 a.m., before finally heading to bed himself, Harold performed one last check on his children. He opened their bedroom door and looked inside. In the dim light, both Asha and O'Brien appeared to be sound asleep in their respective beds. This brief moment at 2:30 a.m. represents the final confirmed sighting of Asha Degree inside her family home. Sometime during the night, O'Brien woke up briefly. He later recalled hearing Asha's bed squeak and seeing her standing in the room. In the darkness, he assumed she was merely getting up to use the bathroom and fell back asleep, expecting her to return to her bed. What happened over the next few hours remains a blank canvas. When investigators later examined the house, they found no evidence of a break-in. Every window was intact, the doors were secure, and there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry. Asha's departure left the physical structure of the home completely undisturbed, suggesting that she opened the door and stepped outside of her own accord. The quiet ended at 6:30 a.m. when Akia Degree's alarm rang. She walked down the hallway to wake the children for school and prepare them for a normal Monday. She stepped into the bedroom, only to find O'Brien asleep and Asha's bed empty. Realizing her daughter was not in the room, Akila searched the house, calling her name, before waking Harold and checking with nearby family members. Within minutes, the family realized that Asha was truly gone. Along with her black school book bag, a pair of blue jeans, and a pink hooded sweatshirt. The absence of her backpack and clothes provided the first indication that her departure was not a spontaneous flight. She had prepared. Yet, the missing items left investigators with profound questions. Did Asha pack her bag secretly in the days leading up to Valentine's Day? Or did she gather her belongings in the dark hours of that rainy morning? More importantly, did a 9-year-old child conceive this plan entirely on her own? Or was she coaxed and directed by an outside force? At 6:39 a.m., Harold dialed 911, initiating an emergency response and beginning a desperate search. The search for Asha shifted from her empty bedroom to the asphalt of North Carolina Highway 18. Sometime between 3:45 and 4:15 that morning, the first potential traces of her movements appeared outside the home. Two independent motorists reported seeing a small child walking south along the shoulder of the dark two-lane road, about 1 mile from her house. The conditions that night were harsh for a 9-year-old. The temperature hovered near freezing, and a steady wind drove rain across the slick pavement. According to sheriff's records, one truck driver found the sight so unusual that he decided to turn his vehicle around. He drove back, seeking to check on the lone figure walking through the storm. But as his headlights swept across the roadside, the child did not wait for him. She left the pavement, moving quickly into the thick wooded embankment that bordered the highway. She vanished into the darkness before any contact could be made. These accounts quickly became the foundation of the early investigation. For the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office, the reports were highly credible due to their consistent timing and matching descriptions. They provided investigators with a key starting point, placing a child matching Asha's height and clothing on the highway within 90 minutes of her father's last bedroom check. Yet, these sightings also introduced a web of possibilities. Because the encounters occurred in the pre-dawn darkness, through rain-slicked windshields and moving headlights, they carried inherent limitations. Investigators had to consider whether the drivers had indeed seen Asha, or if distance and poor visibility had obscured the truth. If the child on the highway was Asha, her behavior sparked intense debate. Her flight into the woods could point to several different motivations. A young girl, taught to avoid strangers, might naturally run from a large vehicle stopping near her in the dark. Alternatively, she may have been determined to keep moving, actively avoiding anyone who might try to return her to her parents. Some investigators wondered if she was traveling toward a specific, pre-arranged meeting point and viewed the concerned motorist as an obstacle. The physical environment of the highway offered no simple answers. When search teams and tracking dogs arrived at the stretch of road near the woods, they found no footprints, no dropped items, and no scent trail to follow. The storm had washed away any physical confirmation, leaving only the memories of two passing drivers to guide the search. The response to Harold Degree's 911 call was immediate, transforming the quiet stretch of Highway 18 into an active command post. Within hours, the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and the FBI mobilized a coordinated search. Ground teams, canine units, and helicopters swept the rugged terrain. Neighbors, church members, and local volunteers formed search lines, walking shoulder to shoulder through the cold, damp woods. Despite the scale of this mobilization, the grid searches yielded no immediate sign of Asha, and tracking dogs failed to pick up her scent along the rain-swept asphalt. The initial sweep established no confirmed direction of travel and no explanation for why she had walked out into the storm. Then, a potential lead was found in a small disused tool shed at Turner's Upholstery, a business owned by local residents Raleigh and Debbie Turner. Located near the stretch of highway where the motorists reported seeing the child, the outbuilding became the focus of intense scrutiny. Inside, search teams found several small items that the Degree family believed belonged to Asha. The items included candy wrappers, a green felt tip marker, a white pencil bearing an Atlanta Olympics logo, and a yellow hair bow with a bear motif. There was also a small wallet-sized photograph of a young girl, whom the Degrees did not recognize. Though these objects suggested a physical link to Asha's path, they remained ambiguous. Over the years, investigators treated them as unverified clues rather than definitive proof of her presence. No public forensic reports, DNA analyses, or fingerprint matches have ever officially confirmed that Asha entered the shed or handled those items. The small photograph was eventually identified as a picture of one of Asha's school classmates. But how it might have ended up in a roadside tool shed remained entirely unexplained. The find raised more questions than answers, leaving search teams without a clear destination and investigators with a trail that seemed to grow cold almost as soon as it began. On August 3, 2001, 18 months after Asha vanished, the first physical trace of her was found. This development did not happen in Shelby, or even within Cleveland County. Instead, it occurred roughly 30 miles to the north, along a stretch of Highway 18 in neighboring Burke County, near a quiet wooded area. This location sat on the exact highway where she was last seen walking, but further into the rural foothills. A group of construction workers was clearing land to excavate an access road for a new home. As they worked near the roadside, they noticed something unusual buried in the soil. It was a package, deliberately hidden. When they retrieved and opened it, they found a black nylon school backpack wrapped securely inside two black plastic trash bags, which had been double sealed to protect the contents from the elements. Written directly on the bag was a name and a family telephone number. It was Asha's. This discovery provided the first confirmed physical link back to the missing 9-year-old since the morning she disappeared. It shifted the focus of the investigation, proving that her belongings had traveled far outside the immediate search grids of Shelby. But the contents of the backpack immediately introduced a new, baffling set of questions for investigators. Inside the bag, alongside her clothing, a pair of jeans and a pink hooded sweatshirt, were two items that did not belong to Asha. One was a red-sleeved concert t-shirt featuring the pop group New Kids on the Block. The other was a copy of the Dr. Seuss children's book, McElligot's Pool. When investigators traced the book's origin, they discovered it belonged to the library collection at Falston Elementary School, the very school Asha attended. Yet, school records and family recollections offered no evidence that Asha had ever checked the book out. Nor did she or anyone in her family own the vintage music t-shirt. These items became important puzzle pieces. No one could explain how a vintage band shirt and a library book Asha had never borrowed ended up inside her backpack. Did someone else place these objects inside the bag? Or did Asha acquire them along the way? If she did not pack them, how did they find their way into her possession? The manner of the burial itself raised even greater concerns. The double-wrapped, sealed plastic bags suggested a deliberate effort to preserve the contents, to keep them protected from rain, mud, and decaying soil. This was not the act of a child discarding an unwanted item in a panic. It was a calculated concealment, carried out by someone who wanted to ensure the bag remained intact for a long time. This leaves investigators with a series of unresolved questions. Who owned these unfamiliar items? Who took the time to wrap the backpack so carefully and bury it along a roadside 30 miles from her home? Who handled the bag and who placed it in the ground? Most importantly, was Asha ever physically present at this Burke County burial site? Or did someone else carry her belongings there to hide the evidence of her disappearance? The answers to these questions remain locked away, but the discovery of the book bag permanently redefined the search. In May 2016, the FBI released a public appeal seeking information about a vehicle spotted on Highway 18 near the time Asha vanished. According to a witness account, a person matching the young girl's description may have entered a dark green, early 1970s Lincoln Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird. The bulletin noted a specific physical detail. The car had visible rust around the wheel wells. This description was treated strictly as a possible lead, a potential path for investigators rather than a confirmed event. No direct evidence has ever proven that Asha boarded this vehicle or that the driver was involved in her disappearance. The vehicle narrative grew more complex during the September 2024 search of properties in Cleveland County. Investigators towed a vintage dark green 1964 AMC Rambler from a local residence. While this car shared some broad visual similarities with the vehicle from the 2016 alert, primarily its dark green paint and classic styling, it was not the early 1970s Lincoln or Ford Thunderbird model identified by the FBI. It remains critical to separate similarity from certainty. The discovery of the Rambler does not confirm it was the vehicle from the original motorist reports, nor does its recovery prove any direct connection to the events of February 14th. Without official forensic matches or corroborated testimony, the green car lead remains a theory. It represents a lingering question mark in the search for what happened to Asha after she stepped off the roadside and into the dark. On September 10th, 2024, investigators executed search warrants on multiple properties in Cleveland County, focusing on homes and land along Cherryville Road in Shelby. These law enforcement actions targeted properties associated with Roy and Connie Dedman, as well as several of their adult children. The warrants were issued after newer forensic testing of Asha's recovered belongings produced genealogical leads, reviving an investigation that had spent more than 2 decades searching for answers. It is important to emphasize that these court documents contain unproven allegations, and no convictions have ever been obtained against any of the individuals named in them. According to the search warrant affidavits, this new phase of the investigation was driven by advanced DNA testing. Scientists analyzing physical evidence recovered from the Burke County search site focused on a hair stem found on an undershirt belonging to Asha. The affidavits reported that this hair stem was genetically consistent with Annalee Dedman Ramirez, who was 13 years old in February 2000. The genealogical work also produced a second genetic link on the same clothing item. This profile was linked to Russell Bradley Underhill, a man who had lived in regional assisted living facilities associated with the Dedman family's business operations. Underhill, who was a resident in those facilities, died in 2004. Investigators used consumer genetic genealogy databases to identify his family tree, eventually leading them to his specific profile. To understand the weight of these findings, it is important to look at the limitations of modern DNA science in plain language. A genetic association with an item is a powerful investigative tool, but it is not definitive proof of a crime. Forensic experts emphasize that the presence of a DNA profile on a piece of clothing does not establish the timing of when that material was deposited. It cannot prove the mechanism of transfer. DNA can be deposited through direct touch, but it can also be moved through secondary transfer, where hair or skin cells travel from one surface to another without direct contact between the individuals. For this reason, a genetic match on a piece of evidence does not prove direct physical contact, timing, or guilt. Despite these scientific limits, the search warrant affidavits presented a specific theory of the crime. Investigators wrote that they had probable cause to believe Asha was the victim of a homicide and that her body had been concealed on one of the searched properties. The documents revealed that authorities were examining potential connections between the geographic corridor of Highway 18, the care facilities managed by the Deadmans, patient transport vans, and a green AMC Rambler owned by the family. This vehicle shared visual similarities with the car from earlier witness descriptions, adding to the state's interest. For the community and the public, these sudden search operations raised immediate questions about how the lives of these two families could have crossed. Yet, investigators have repeatedly stated that no relationship between the Degree and Deadman families has ever been established. There is no evidence that Asha or her parents knew anyone in the Deadman household prior to her disappearance, nor is there any known connection between their daily routines, their church lives, or their schools. Following the searches and the public release of the warrant details, the Deadman family issued strong denials, stating they had absolutely no involvement in Asha's disappearance or any knowledge of what happened to her. Because these court filings represent the state's petition to search properties rather than formal charges, they must be treated strictly as allegations. In the American legal system, every person named in these affidavits is presumed innocent, and no criminal convictions have been made in connection with these recent forensic developments. The search for definitive answers remains open, guided by scientific testing that raises new possibilities, but has yet to provide absolute certainty. In February 2025, the focus of the investigation turned from physical properties to digital spaces. Investigators obtained search warrants on February 13th, which a magistrate signed 5 days later. These legal orders authorized a search of cellular phones, email accounts, and social media logs. Specifically, authorities targeted 3 devices: an iPhone 14 Pro, an iPhone 11 Pro belonging to Roy Deadman, and an iPhone 11. Among the data retrieved, investigators recovered a private message containing a specific phrase. The theory is, "I did it. Accident. Covered it up." In the warrant filings, this passage is presented as an investigative theory described within seized materials, not as a proven, legally binding confession. This text matched a separate witness account. A person came forward claiming they heard a similar statement at a social gathering. This claim remains an untested public allegation, and no recording of the conversation has been made public. Reports indicating that a person of interest took a polygraph examination do not offer resolution, as lie detector tests are not admissible as proof. In the American legal system, search warrants only establish probable cause, that evidence of a crime exists in a specific location. They do not establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and no formal charges have been filed. The search for the truth of what happened to Asha continues. If you value careful investigations that separate evidence from rumor, subscribe to the Unsolved record. The known timeline of February 14th, 2000 contains only a few undisputed facts. Harold Degree saw his daughter asleep at 2:30 in the morning. Motorists saw a small child walking along Highway 18 near 4 in the morning. By 6:30 in the morning, Asha's bed was empty and her school bag was gone. 18 months later, that same bag was found buried 30 miles north, double wrapped in plastic, containing her personal items, along with a library book she never borrowed and a band shirt she did not own. Decades later, advanced testing on those items yielded genetic matches that led to property searches and court warrants. But these physical benchmarks do not answer the fundamental mysteries. The record still lacks an explanation for why a 9-year-old left her home in a freezing rainstorm, or whether someone coaxed her out. It is still unknown who owned the unfamiliar shirt, how the library book entered her possession, or who carefully wrapped and buried her backpack along the roadside. The connection to the green car remains unproven. Even with the recent DNA leads and digital search warrants, the state has not established a clear destination, a confirmed handler, or a final location. Forensic profiles and seized vehicles are signs of a narrowing path, but they are not the same as a solved case. Evolving leads indicate that the scope of the investigation has sharpened, but the central question remains unanswered. Asha Degree is still missing. Today, the search for Asha Degree is no longer just about a storm on a dark highway, but the quiet spaces where secrets are kept. As modern forensics close in on the truth, the urgency to find her only grows. For a family waiting decades, every day without answers is a day too long. If you value careful investigations that separate evidence from rumor, subscribe to the Unsolved record.